Moral injury, a misconceptualized crisis. According to a documentary directed by Michael Collins about 2 veterans who served in Iraq who are dealing with mental health issues, states that 20 veterans commit suicide every day. Mary Bartlett, with a PhD in counselor education at Auburn University, states that suicide rates of people serving in the military are parallel to the suicide rates of the general population, but at a much more dramatic rate. And the reason for this much more dramatic rate is known as a term of moral injury. Now, what is the main cause of moral injury? Well, before being able to know what moral injury is, or being able to know the main reason for moral injury, you must know what moral injury is. Mary Bartlett says that moral injury is a stress as a result of an event that goes against your moral or ethical beliefs. What exactly causes moral injury? Dave Lewis, deputy commander of the 52nd Operations Group at Columbus Air Force Base, says that when a soldier kills their enemy, that goes against their own morals and therefore are morally injured. The same concept goes with a soldier that witnesses something that is unethical. Another problem is how a soldier is trained and how they are expected to act. A soldier is expected to do away with any sort of love, compassion, empathy, which is a major problem because when they get back home, they're unable to give those loving qualities to their family, which is a major mental battle for them. Moral injury is similar to PTSD, but there is a fine line between the two. Lewis states that moral injury is when a soldier commits any sort of type of violence or feels betrayed due to any event that has occurred. Moral injury is more of a reflection or personal thoughts, whereas PTSD is more based off of fear. Now, it's very important to differentiate the two because if you don't, then these soldiers are going to continue to experience moral injury. Moral injury is the most commonly caused by the killing of an enemy. Dr. Marion Dienov, the Canada Research Chair in Armed Conflict, states that there's something called a transgression-based event, which is when an individual takes part in an act that goes against their own morals and beliefs. Killing is a specific event under that. Dienov explains that because of these events, the perception of the soldiers on themselves and the world around them changes drastically. Lewis states that the military is very efficient in destroying the natural resistance of killing. This means that these soldiers are very desensitized to killing another enemy. Now, this seems like it would be normal for people in the military, but it is actually a harm to their humanity, especially when they go back home. Dave Lewis gives an example of when you compare the firing rates and determine the difference between, or the distance between enemies, that the closer the enemies are, the lower the injury and the fatality rates are. And that is due to the soldiers' hesitation to kill one another. When you're in close-up battle, these soldiers realize are much more personable with each other, much more close-up. And when they get back home, they're actually able to see those faces distinctly, and which causes moral injury. Lewis brings up an interesting point that these soldiers challenge themselves internally, but they won't share it to people outside of themselves. He gives a personal example of when he was part of a wholesale killing machine, and it was very close up and personal. He states that what he did was very morally challenging and that he still has feelings of regret and guilt to this day. You would think that he'd want to tell his parents, his family, his friends about it, but actually he just kept it to himself because he didn't feel like they could relate to him. Now, there are people who believe that authority is the main reason for moral injury within the military. Ted Thomas, the director of Department of Command and Leadership in the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, states that there is something called intelligent disobedience, which when a soldier goes against their authority, for good reasons. Now, this takes a whole lot of courage to do, but if they do not act on this courage, they are going to have moral injury, and their lives will most likely be ruined due to the unethical actions that are asked of them. Tim Hoyt, the second lieutenant in the Army Reserve, states that these soldiers trust their authority very much. But when the authority orders them to go against any rules of engagement or any other violations that go against their own beliefs, it causes moral injury. Hoyt explains that witnessing another hurting soldier can also cause moral injury, especially when the soldier is discouraged or ordered not to save that life. Tom Voss, one of the Iraq veterans that was interviewed by Michael Collins, gives a personal story about how he saw a hurting soldier but was ordered not to save his life. He still sees this soldier's face distinctly today and wonders what he could have done to help save that soldier if it weren't for the authority ordering him not to. While submission to authority may cause the soldier to have moral injury, the act of killing another soldier has a much greater impact on their mental stabilities due to guilt. There are many veterans that can attest to this and give personal stories of this. Martin Walter, assistant teaching professor of philosophy at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, gives an example by the name of Nick Rudolph, who was a rifleman trying to avoid being shot. And when he realized who was shooting at him, he realized it wasn't a soldier, but it was actually a kid. Now, through natural instinct, Rudolph decided to shoot this kid, but it was justified in the moment due to his commitment to the U.S. Army's mission to find and kill people of the Taliban. The only issue is now that he's not deployed and back at home where there are norms in place, moral norms in place. He is now feels guilty and is regrets it very much. Guilt separates moral injury by killing and moral injury by authority. By killing someone, the impact on the other person is the perpetrator's fault, whereas if the authority was involved, they could blame it on the authority, decreasing the amount of moral injury. Taking a man's life is probably the most immoral thing a person can do. Yes, ordering a man to leave another hurting soldier to die or to do some other immoral action causes moral injury, but the act of killing another person's impact of moral injury is much greater. Thank you.
Excuse me. Okay, Brady. What information did you need that you weren't able to find or locate?
Well, so when I was doing my research, I came across a question about what can we do to help prevent these soldiers that are back home, keep them from committing suicide or lower their moral injury. And so that was something that I tried to research through the documentary. There was a solution called the power breath, but there was not enough information in the documentary. So I tried to research it, but I could not find much information on that certain solution. So being able to have more information on that would have definitely helped advance my whole perspective on moral injury.
Okay. And your second question, what are the implications of your findings to your community?
So my research is mainly based off of like the two different perspectives and of what causes moral injury, but then it's also its effects. So with these soldiers having a lot of trauma and a lot of mental health issues, there's an organization within Lubbock and Amarillo area called VetStar that has multiple different programs to help with housing and stuff like that. So there's a program called a Military Veterans Peers Network, which is where they find these veterans that are having mental issues, having moral injury, and are struggling because of it, and they pair up a peer with that veteran, and that peer's job is to enlist trust back into these veterans and enlist camaraderie and help them become the person they were before they were deployed.